Hi everyone, welcome to the session. Today we are going to talk about how you can deploy n8n to AWS using Amazon Lightsail and Easypanel. So what we're going to learn in this session is how you can get started with n8n on AWS. We're going to go through a little bit about Amazon Lightsail and why you might want to use it for your projects. We're going to show how to set up everything. So we're going to set up the Lightsail instance. We're going to set up Easypanel, which is an easier way to sort of interact with what's running on our instance. And then we're going to set up n8n on top of that so that you can start to automate and build in process automations around your business. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about why you would want to make use of Amazon Lightsail. So Amazon Lightsail is a virtual private server offering provided by AWS. And essentially what that means is you can use it to have a very sort of user-friendly, easy-to-use interface to launch private servers in the cloud. So when you do that, or when you use Amazon Lightsail, you have a couple of options. You can deploy either applications themselves, so they are templates or blueprints, as they call them, built into Amazon Lightsail that can help you to set up things like Django or Drupal or WHM or typical sort of applications you would use for a web program. It also has support for things like databases, setting up content delivery networks. There's a couple of storage options that you can set up too. The main benefit of Amazon Lightsail is that it is very easy to use. So if you're not familiar with AWS too much, then it's a good way to get started. There are, of course, downsides to this in that because it's quite simple to use, it lacks a little bit of the functionality that you might need if you were building a more sort of complicated application. So for this use case, I'd recommend it for getting started or for building sort of basic workflows. But if you do need to have something that's a little bit more customized, it might be better to look at how you do that with EC2, which is another product of AWS, which provides just raw instances. You do need a little bit more configuration with EC2, and it's not as straightforward, although we could do a video in that in the future if you want. Right, so that's the basics of Lightsail. I'll talk a little bit about why we want to make use of Easypanel. Easypanel is essentially like a control panel interface. It's similar to like Amazon Lightsail also has an interface for setting up the actual instance. Easypanel provides a couple of templates which just allow you to deploy more specific applications onto the instance. So Easypanel uses Docker under the hood. So if you've ever heard of containers, it's essentially a way to run applications without the dependencies sort of interacting with each other. And so it just provides a really easy way to get started. And I do recommend it if you're just getting n8n set up on AWS for the first time, that you make use of Easypanel. There are a couple of other options like Coolify, which might help with this too. But for this, we're just going to use Easypanel. And in the future, we'll do another video to do a more in-depth, either just using EC2 on its own or using another tool, which I can show you. So to start off our tutorial, we're going to start in the AWS console. We don't necessarily need to choose the region right now because Lightsail will have an option for us to choose that in a bit. So what you're going to do is go over to the search, and we're just going to type in Lightsail. We're going to click on that. Now that we're in the Lightsail console, you can see what I mentioned earlier. There's a couple of options on the left here. So you can set up databases, containers, storage. There's even a capability to set up Jupyter notebooks. So if you're working with machine learning applications, that is also available too. We're just going to stick with instances today. But if you want a session on any of the others, just let me know. So we're going to start off by doing create instance. When we do that, we are prompted with our create instance view. The first thing we want to choose is the location of our instance. As you can see, there's a couple of options that Lightsail has out of the box. What I would say is if you are deploying this for applications, I would put this region as close to the region where your application is running. If you are using it for your own business purposes, I would put it as close to where your business premises is. So for instance, I'm based in London, and so I will make use of the London region for this instance. And it's really up to you what you choose, but just try and make it as close to whatever's going to be using n8n just to make the latency bearable for your applications. So we'll choose London. You don't necessarily need to choose the availability zone. So if you know a little bit more about AWS and how the data centers are configured, you get this thing called availability zones. So you can have, you can kind of think of one availability zone as like a cluster of really highly connected data centers. And there's really usually very low latency between instances that are in the same AZ. And if you have multiple availability zones, you have a lot more resilience in your application, but you also have a little bit more latency when it comes to communicating between applications. Again, if you know exactly which AZ your existing application is running, you might want to match it to your n8n AZ, and that's going to give you the best performance when you're connecting between two different applications in the same AZ. But for now, I'm just going to keep it as the default because I don't have any other applications that I'm going to be connecting to. The next is where we choose what is actually going to be installed on our instance when we boot it up for the first time. You can see a couple of the blueprints that are available. There's Drupal, there's GitLab, there's a couple of ones that you might be familiar with. We're not going to go with that. We're going to go to this little tab at the top and we're just going to click Operating System Only. And here we get a couple of operating systems that are available as blueprints. So we're going to go with Ubuntu, and that's just because I've tested it before. It works, and it's a really simple way to get started. And Ubuntu is quite user-friendly in the Linux ecosystem, so I'd highly recommend making use of it if you're new to Linux in any way. So we're going to click Ubuntu 24.04, so that's a more later version of Ubuntu. So the next thing that we're looking at is this SSH key. If you've used Amazon Lightsail before, you might already have an SSH key available here. But if not, if this is blank, you can do create custom key, and you can select the region. It's going to be the same region that your instance is in. And if you click create, you give it a key pair name. So I'll just do it, I'll call it London. And if you generate a key pair, it'll give you a private key that you can download and keep in order to connect to this instance via a terminal. So we're not going to use a terminal from our local machine for this tutorial. We're actually going to use a functionality of the AWS console to be able to connect to that instance. So we won't necessarily need the private key, but I do recommend that if you are going to do administrative actions on the instance in the future, just keep that private key somewhere safe where you can have access to it later. So with that set, you can now scroll down, and the next thing we're going to talk about is the size of the instance. Now, it's important to note that with n8n, I think they do recommend at least 2 gigabytes of memory. So you're going to need to make sure that you have enough capacity on the instance to run your applications. It's up to you which size you choose. If you have a lot of workflows that you're going to be building and self-hosting, you might want to have a larger instance. If this is the first time you're setting it up, I try and recommend going as little as possible. And the thing that you can see here, which is kind of a benefit of Amazon Lightsail, is that it has a fixed pricing model. As in, if you just use one instance, you will only get charged for a fixed amount for the month. This is different to how AWS charges for some of its other services. Some of the other services have what is called pay-as-you-go pricing. So what that means is if your application scales up and down, you will pay depending on the price. If you're new to AWS, that might be a little bit sort of daunting because you might end up getting a bill that you're not quite sure how to pay just because of the fact that your application scaled up and down. So Amazon Lightsail is a little bit better for that because it just has a fixed price. And so you will only pay that price at the end of the month. So we're going to go with the $12 per month option just because we want to keep it small and we want to have at least 2 gigabytes of memory for our n8n installation. Next, we can go down, and the last thing we can do is just give our instance a name, and this is just how we identify it in the Amazon Lightsail console. So if we wanted to have other applications deployed side by side with this n8n deployment, we'll just have different names. So we're going to just call it n8n instance. The last thing is tags. You can use your own tags if you want. I'd recommend if you've got groups of instances that you want to have some sort of connection between them to use tags, because when you go into Cost Explorer, you can actually use tags to delineate different costs for applications. So if you have lots of applications that relate to the same project, for instance, you might want to tag those together. We're not going to necessarily use tags today, but we'll just go ahead and click this Create Instance button. So now we've created the instance, we can see that it goes into a starting state. And what we can do from here is we'll just click into the instance to see some of the details about this instance. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that there's quite a bit of information here, and there's quite a few tabs as well with even more details about what's going on. The most important thing for this tutorial is, first of all, the public IP address. So this is the way that you will access our application. So this is both with Easypanel and n8n. It'll be hosted on this IP address, and if you put that into a browser, you will basically be telling your browser to navigate to the instance. The other thing to look at is metrics over here. So if we click metrics here, so what you want to look at here is potentially if your workflows are using up too much compute power, which can be the case if you've got lots and lots of workflows all on the same instance. And if you do see it going into this sort of burstable zone, then I'd recommend maybe looking at using a larger instance for your n8n workflows. So that's important to look at. And let's go back to connect over here. So now that our instance is in a running state, we can connect to the instance just using this connect using SSH button. And if we click this, we'll get a little window that pops up, and it will drop us into a command line shell running within our deployed Amazon Lightsail instance. So this is a terminal where we can have a look at what's going on. We can install different packages, and we can generally just interact with what's going on within this virtual machine. So what we're going to do from here is we're now going to install Easypanel. And to do that, we're going to go over to the easypanel.io website. And on the website here, you will see that it has a installation script. We'll just copy that over. We'll go back to our terminal over here, and then we'll just paste this in. And when we do this, what is going to happen is it's going to pull down a script, and it's going to run that script on the instance. And that's going to just basically install all of the packages and get Easypanel up and running on your virtual machine. Now, the only thing to change is that because we want to run this as an administrator, we just need to add sudo just before this sh over here. And if we hit enter, we'll see that it starts to install Docker, and it will install and download all the dependencies to get Easypanel up and running. So this is going to take a little bit of time. So what we're going to do in the meantime is just go back to the Lightsail console, and we're going to enable access to a few ports. And I'll talk a little bit about that when we go over. So back in the Lightsail console, the next tab we're just going to look at is this networking tab over here. So in the networking tab, we can see the public IP address is available to us again. There's a private IP address, which we won't necessarily talk too much about today. The one that we're interested in at the moment is this IPv4 firewall. So the firewall, it just determines what different ports we can access from the outside world. So as we're accessing our instance, we can see here that only port 22 and port 80 are available for access. So if we were to access a port, say port 3000, which is what we'll need for Easypanel, you're going to get a timeout, and that's not going to be good for accessing our application. And depending on what types of applications you are installing, you might need to open up and close different ports. I'd recommend, as far as possible, not to open up too many ports, because that does slightly put your application more at risk, but you do need to have certain ports open to be able to access certain types of applications. So we're going to add two rules here, which is going to tell our firewall that we are going to allow access on certain ports. So we'll go to this add rule button here. The first rule we're going to add is just for port 3000. So we can keep it as custom TCP 3000. And this is what's going to be used to access our Easypanel installation for the first time. So Easypanel has a cool way of setting up an SSL certificate, but the first time you access it, you need to access it on HTTP, which is not as secure as HTTPS, but it is a way to access it to configure it for the first time. So we'll hit create. And with that created, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hit add rule. And here we're going to do port 443. So 443 is what's used by default for HTTPS connections. And so when we enable this port, we're basically going to allow traffic to that port so that when we try and access our n8n installation, we will be able to access it with no problems. So we're just going to hit create again. And so now all of the ports are configured. And so what we can do is we can go back to the terminal and just check on our installation over there. So we're back in the terminal and we can see that it's successfully downloaded all of the Docker images and it's installed all of the things it needs to install. We can just check that by going sudo docker ps. So this will just list all of the containers that are running on the virtual machine. So as you can see, there's a couple of containers running. You can see Easypanel running over here. You can see Traffic, which is a load balancer over here. And you can actually just see the different ports that are available for interacting with these two apps. So the first one, 3000, we've enabled that in the networking tab in Amazon Lightsail. We can also see 80 and 443, which are our HTTP and HTTPS endpoints. And you can see that we've basically enabled all of those in the networking tab. So we'll be able to access this application on those ports. So with that installed, we actually have this URL over here. So what we can do is we can copy this over. So Easypanel is smart enough to have picked up that this IP address is the public IP. We can also go back and see that it's the same IP that's over here in our Amazon Lightsail instance. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to go over to our browser and we're just going to paste that in and we're going to hit enter. So when we do that, we are greeted with the Setup Easypanel dialog. This is only going to happen for the very first time that you access Easypanel. And from after this onwards, you will just use the username and password to log in as per usual. So I'll just fill in these details and then we can hit Setup. So once we do that, we get to see the Easypanel dashboard. And there's a couple of things to draw your attention to. The first is these 4 blocks at the top here. These represent the resource usage of your virtual machine. So it's similar to what you would get from the Amazon Lightsail metrics tab, and it just gives you a little bit more information from the Easypanel dashboard itself. It is important to keep track of as you're building more workflows because as you do so, you will tend to use up more and more CPU. And you might get workflows that are failing. And in that case, you'll have to come and check that you're not using up too much memory or too much CPU capacity. And if you do see that, you may need to increase the size of your instance for your n8n deployments. So to create our project, we're going to go over to New, and we're going to just give it a name. So I'm going to call this back office. I think you have to use underscores here just to as a naming convention. So if I do that, I'll click create. And when we do that, we are dropped into the project dialog. And from here, we are able to add what they call services. So within a project, you can have multiple services. So you could have the n8n installation, you can have WordPress, you can have a couple of things grouped together. We're just going to create one service, which is going to be the n8n service. And we're going to do that using a template. So we have to do that by going up to the top right and clicking templates. And when we open that up, we can see that there's a couple of sort of commonly used templates. So you see some things like databases, some apps like Box. We're going to go over to templates here, and we're going to go and just search in this bar for n8n. When we do that, we just see that there's only one here, and we're just going to click that. This view, we get a little bit of a description about n8n. We get what the service is going to be called. So that's the service within our project. And the last thing that I'll just draw your attention to is this image version here. So with the templates that are provided by Easypanel, they're not always the most up-to-date templates. So what I'd recommend is going over to the n8n documentation, finding out what the latest version is, and just replacing it over there. So what I'll do is I'll go do that. Here from the n8n website, we're just going to go to this GitHub button over here. And from the GitHub repo, you can go down to releases. And if we click here, and from this view, we can see the different releases of n8n. I would recommend not going for a pre-release, but just scroll down until you see latest. And if you copy this version over here, and we'll just copy that, and then we'll go back to our Easypanel application, and we'll just paste that in over there. So that's going to make sure that when we deploy our n8n service, it's going to have the latest version. I would just caveat that sometimes there are changes between n8n versions, and it could be that it might not work. But I think the n8n service is kind of generic enough that it should work most of the time. But if it doesn't work, I would just say revert to the default that is provided with the Easypanel template. But we'll do 1.112.3, and we'll just create it and see how it goes. So we're going to do that by just clicking create. So it says it's created successfully, and we can go to the project. And from this view, we can just see that it's basically starting up. And so what it's doing is going and downloading Docker images. It's going to set them up and configure them so that we can access our n8n installation. So we'll just give it a little bit of time, and we'll come back once it's set up. Okay, so that completed. It's important to have a look at what's going on in this log over here. One thing to note is that when you're installing n8n using this mechanism, it's going to by default use SQLite. So that means that the data that you store in your n8n workflows is going to be stored on the actual service itself. And what that means is sometimes if the service dies or if the application crashes, you can actually lose that data in your n8n installation. So I'd really recommend this kind of just as a very beginner way of setting up n8n. We can go into how to set up databases in the future. And in that case, what you would do is you'd create another service, which is potentially your database. And then you'd be able to connect n8n to that database using environment variables. And then you'd be able to have a little bit more resilience in your application. We're not going to go through that because we're just setting up a very basic n8n installation. So the last cool thing to point out is that Easypanel will actually set up an HTTPS endpoint for you to access n8n. And you can see the URL is output here for you. The other way to access the installation is this little button over here, this little open button. And if you click that, it will open up the URL and we will be able to access our n8n installation. So remember, because I enabled that port on the Amazon Lightsail instance, we've enabled port 443, so that allows us to have a secure connection to our n8n installation. So here, again, this happens just for the first time when we're installing n8n. So with our details filled in, we just hit next and we can create our owner account. So with that, you are able to now access the n8n dashboard. And from here, you could go and create workflows, do all of that good automation stuff with n8n. And that's basically it. That's how you would set up n8n on an Amazon Lightsail instance, how you get access to it. The last thing I'll show is just how you can delete everything. So once you are finished with this tutorial, you won't incur any extra costs. So to delete, what we can do is what I'd recommend is if you are working with any workflows, first of all, is just back those up, either copy the template out of n8n or just make sure that you're not going to lose any data by doing this process. And you can start off by going over just to Lightsail. From the Lightsail console, we'll just choose our n8n instance. And it's really as simple as just hitting delete. We don't need to necessarily go into deleting Easypanel or anything like that. We're just going to delete the whole instance. So when we hit delete instance, we just click that. So with that deleted, everything is deleted from your account. And so you won't incur any extra costs. So that's it for the tutorial today. Thank you for watching this session. If you found it useful, please give it a like below and subscribe. It would really help me out. If you have any other ideas for sessions you'd like to see, maybe you want to go and just deploy something onto EC2, maybe you want to actually go deeper into n8n and how you build workflows, just let me know. I'm happy to give those tutorials out for you for free on this channel. And I will see you at the next one. Have a good day. Cheers.